Hi, my name is Claude Hungerford, and I'm a PhD student at Dallas Baptist University, and I just read the book, The 2020 Workplace by Janie Meister and Kelly Williard. What this book attempts to do is to survey the current workplace as it is and some of the corresponding challenges, and then also take some of the developing trends that are in today's workplaces and predict what is going to be needed to be successful in the 2020 workplace. As I review the book, I'll look at the basic premise at which they wrote the book, some of the research that they used to write the book, talk about the book, lay out the overview, and then some of the criticisms and overall a critique of the book. Before we start, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the awards that the book has garnered over the last couple of years. As you can see, the 2020 Workplace has received several prestigious awards. First, the 2011 Bellwether Award given by the Association of Community Colleges, and then also in 2011 the Axiom Award in the category of Human Resources. They received the bronze. And then 2010 the Soundview Award, which looks at the top 30 business books of the year, does a quick 20-minute audio review, and then has an 8-page handout of the book. Very, very good resource if you want to get a quick overview of the 2020 workplace. An important aspect of any book review is to understand the background of the authors and some of the experience they actually bring to the table. As you can see on the slide here, that both Jeannie and Carrie bring a lot of experience from the executive level and also the HR level. And also, their experience would garner a lot of respect from their peers. As a result, one would tend to believe that they have the credentials to back up a lot of what they're going to be saying in the 2020 workplace. Before getting into the nuts and bolts of the 2020 workplace, one of the things I'd like to do is look at the basic reasons for them writing the book. We'll look at a couple of videos, and in their own words, we're going to look at the premise for which they wrote the book. So Meister will be doing that. And then it's interesting, a lot of the original research that they went through, and Williard will be talking about that as well. After we go through both of those videos, then we'll get into some of my initial impressions of the book.
You have to think very creatively about each segment of your employee and understand how to motivate them and communicate with them and develop them in a different way. So what are organizations doing? Well, first they're doing reverse mentoring. That means a millennial, someone born between the years of 1977 and 1997, often can mentor a senior executive on the power of social media. The next thing they're doing is actually group mentoring online, using online technologies to mentor rather than just face-to-face. The third technique that companies are using, like L'Oreal, the cosmetics company, is that they're holding formal workshops, formal training workshops, where they're bringing together a multi-diverse age group and really talking about the differences in how they communicate and different working styles so that they can form a more highly productive team.
Let me tell you a little bit about the research that we did to get ready for this book. It took us 3 years to write, and we interviewed over 2,200 people around the world, asking them what would they be interested in for their next job. We also interviewed over 300 heads of HR, surveyed them to say, what are you doing to get ready for the next generation of workers coming in and what people expect of any age group in their roles over the next few years. And then we featured over 50 case studies in the books that you have in your packet. So I'm going to just start, as we get ready to set up a panel discussion, I'm going to just start with kind of the big picture research, but I want you to know that we took this all the way down to the pragmatic. What can companies do now?
Okay, initial impressions. Put them in two basic areas: current issues that are driving changes in the current workplace and changes that are required to be ready for the 2020 workplace. Some of the things already talked about real quickly, but the generational demographics. by 2020, they contend that there are going to be 5 generations that are going to be in the workplace. That's the first time that that's ever happened, and there's going to be subsequently challenges. The pace of technological innovations. The great work on this is going to be the Velocity Manifesto, and they sort of touch on some of the things that the pace of technology changes is going to be a thing that's affecting the workplace now. Obviously, it has the last 10 years, but even more so the coming 10 years in the 2020 workplace. Shortage and subsequent requirement for knowledge workers. They're predicting that by 2020 that 80% of all the workers in organizations are going to be knowledge workers. There's going to be a significant shortage, and so this is one of the things that's going to be really dependent upon HR, and we sort of get into that into changes required for the 2020 workplace. As you can see, talks about leaders' use of social networking tools, and also that's been a major theme throughout the book as well too. That leaders have to become social media savvy to be able to compete in the 2020 workplace. There's going to be a need for team collaboration, improved communication, that goes back to the social networking, establishment of recruitment talent, and the lifelong learning aspect and concept in organizations. All these sort of fit into the HR aspect of things, and this is why the bottom thing for the 2020 workplace as a requirement is the evolution of HR. HR is not going to look the same in 2020 as it does today because of how they're going to need to recruit, how the millennials are looking and communicating with each other. So that wraps it up for initial impressions. They do a very good job in that, and these are themes that they really are focusing on and are viable for the workplace today and also in 2020. The 2020 workplace, how Meister and Williard organize it, is 9 practical topics, which are chapters, and they're threaded around 3 central themes. Part 1, the changing workplace. Part 2, practices and action today. Part 3, envisioning the 2020 workplace. And then they go ahead and they thread and they build their case in each of these parts. So, for example, Part 1, Chapter 1, the 10 forces that are actually shaping the future workplace. And previously we talked about some of those things. And so this is how they go ahead and they actually lay out the organization of the book. And I stress that each of these are very, very practical applications. In fact, they note in the book that there is so much depth and breadth to these subjects that they could write a book individually in each of these areas. However, they actually do a real good job in getting to the point, highlighting some of the significant aspects of each of the themes that are within each of the 9 chapters. Next, what we're going to look at is actually some of the format of the book and some of the things that they uniquely do in the chapters, and then some of the extra book material that they have on their website as well. Related to the book overview would be the book layout. The authors do a really good job at the end of each chapter providing a very simple overview that's practical and applicable. They also do a good job interweaving tips throughout the book that we can actually use in the workplace today. In doing a little bit of research on the book, I also found that they had a 2020 workplace blog. It has updated information, applicable information that's above and beyond that's in the book. Next, let's go ahead and talk about some of the major takeaways. Some of my notable takeaways from the 2020 workplace are the ones that you see listed on this slide here. First and foremost is how organizations are going to recruit millennial talent. Ultimately, that's going to drive a rethinking of the HR function. It's just not listing out on a web page or a blog to be able to apply. HR is actually going to be utilizing social media to interact and to actually court millennials. And they're very, very connected from the social media perspective anyway. And so this is how the HR organizations in the 2020 workplace are going to reach out and touch them. One of the other things that the central theme throughout, starting from chapter 2, is the multi-generational workforce. How best are you going to capitalize the strengths and then mitigate some of the weaknesses from each of the generations? How can you marry the generations up to be able to go ahead, and the strengths of obviously the millennials are going to be the social media, where folks like myself, a baby boomer, we're not really so into that. But then how can you infuse some of the work ethic that maybe some of the traditionalists have to some of the Gen Yers? And that's a challenge, and that's one of the things that workforces are going to have to learn to do. And then, obviously, because we now are become more of a social media culture, how to leverage social media in the workplace, and not just in HR, but in the collaborative work center efforts on a day-to-day basis. The authors believe that this is going to be a major, major thing that's going to help efficient work centers in the 2020 workplace. CEOs, as a result, have got to become a lot more social media savvy. And then the ultimate, or inevitable, I should say, reality is that organizations are going to have to adopt to how millennials work, how they think, and some of their values, because they're going to become, by 2030, the majority of the workforce. Now for the criticisms. For the most part, chapters 1 through 8, they've been spot on. Chapter 8, they decided that they needed to go ahead and make 20 predictions that would, come to fruition from their perspective in the 2020 workplace. So you can see I've highlighted those in predictions 1, 6, and 20, and there's a common thread here. One of the major parts of the book is that social media is going to be a major theme. It's a major cohesive of the 2020 workplace, from the CEO all the way down to the workers. And it's not what companies are typically doing now as a recruiting type of tool in the HR, but they're looking at it as more of a collaborative and a teamwork type of thing. And those are where some of the common elements are. For example, CEOs that have more followers on Facebook and Twitter are going to be more socially connected. Thus, they have a higher reputational capital. And the authors are contending that those leaders with the greatest reputational capital are the ones that are going to be hired. Number 6, companies are going to be hired with teams. Okay, I'm not so sure that that's going to be a viable thing that's going to be used in the 2020 workplace, because teams have a tendency to be more loyal to each other than the company. Then number 12, you'll be able to elect your leaders. Well, okay, again, this has a social media bent to it, whereas if you have more connectivity with folks, well, then you've established that relationship. Thus, the leaders with the most followers are the ones that are probably going to get elected. Well, as we know, that may not necessarily be the best leader that you would have. So I'm not sure why they felt the need to put this in the book. It caused a little bit of a bump in the road as far as I'm concerned, but they sort of picked up and did very well in chapter 9. Okay, in wrapping it up in conclusion, the upside, 2020 Workplace, an outstanding read. Very well done, very timely, very applicable. I think they've done their homework, they've done their research, they've identified some of the key things that leaders need to be concerned about today, and they've also provided some very, very good information about how to prepare for the workplace in 2020. Again, the only downside, like I had mentioned earlier, they just missed their stride in Unit 8. They caught it back in Unit 9, or Chapter 9. And overall, this is a must-read for CEOs and all HR chiefs and organizations. For business students, again, a great read, and you'll get a lot out of it. Overall, really enjoyed the book and give it 2 thumbs up.